Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Star Fox. The last time we started off the game, we went through the Space Armada going through the black hole as well in the process, and now it's time for the stage listed as Meteor. The Battle Base Meteor. Be sure to use your retros if you're going too fast. Be careful with my R-Wings.
Good luck.
This stage, in comparison to the Space Armada, is a bit tamer, but it has one nasty issue in draw distance. Partially intentional, but partially not. See, the game already has some pretty noticeable pop-in, obviously, as you may have noticed last part. But in this, they actually make it a part of the gimmick through the darkness. Things like pillars, mountains, and such will pop up in the darkness, and you have to make sure you're on your toes in order to dodge it correctly. Now, before we go any further, let's finish off the plot synopsis from the manual that we started last part. We got basically all but the final paragraph out of the way, where it mentioned that Pepper didn't have enough time to train fighters for the R-Wings. And thus, he said, "We need the Star Fox team. This is the call sent out by General Pepper. You are Fox McCloud, leader of the Star Fox team, a group of adventurers with outstanding combat skill. Your mission is to penetrate the defenses of the planet Venom and defeat the forces led by Emperor Andros. Your ability to maneuver the R-Wing fighter will make the difference between the return of peace to the Lilat system and the fall of Corneria to the evil Emperor. As team leader, you are also responsible for the safe return of your Star Fox teammates." Yeah, that's pretty standard for the 90s, all things considered. Now, I mentioned last part that I've been playing this game more or less my entire life, but I should really mention my extended Star Fox experience. I've played more or less every game in the series a good bit nowadays. The only game I still don't own is Zero/Garden. Every time I've seen it, I'll be like, I'll pick it up later, even though I think I would honestly really like the game. But I didn't play the games in a way most people would. A lot of people started with either 1 or 64. And while I am someone who started with 1, I skipped 64 until right before high school. The only game in the series I played otherwise was Star Fox Adventures. That was the second game in the series I played. And that might be why I'm, in general, a lot softer on that game than some other people are. I like a lot about it, even though I think the plot is about the depth of a dinner plate full of water. And I also played a lot of Assault. In fact, I got a lot out of Assault's multiplayer especially. Even though I think, again, the plot in that game is paper thin, I think the gameplay is still good all throughout. Even though the controls for the ground missions are, let's just say they take some getting used to. These doors, doors like this show up a lot through the game, and the thing is about a lot of these types of doors is that they close not long after you shoot them to open them, so you need to do the thing we did with the meteors asteroids, last part rather, in the asteroid belt, and shoot them right before you run into them, just so you can, you know, not get crushed, because, well, yeah, admittedly, it's probably preferable to get hit face-on by them rather than get crushed between them, because then you might lose your wings, but ultimately, you want to avoid damage. Either way, this boss is the Dancing Insector. And while I think you can damage it right off the bat if you shoot carefully, what you want to do immediately is shoot the legs, in which case it'll go into a kind of helicopter propeller kind of sequence, in which case it'll try to swing into you, either at a high or low altitude. This is going high, but I accidentally bounced off the ground, so I took some big damage there. And when we do this twice in a row, a lot of its weak spots are going to open up, because then the blue shield and the legs go off, and you can now shoot them to take them off of it. You don't actually do HP damage until the leg is destroyed, but you need to do this either way, so you might as well do it quickly. Level 2 Twin Blasters, obviously, very, very good for this, because level 2 Twin Blasters are just delicious. The only attack you really have to look out for is that there's technically 2 attacks going on at once at most times. For instance, right now, it's permanently in the helicopter state at this point in the fight, and it can fire either the little, basically it's equivalent to the Twin Blasters from its top, or it does a little plasma attack from the bottom where it shoots fire towards the ground and then will bounce towards you. You need to be careful with that. In fact, just constantly be on the move in this fight is probably the best advice. Stay high when you need to stay high, stay low when you need to stay low, and you should be fine. But that's the second to last standard level. No, that is the last standard level, rather, of level 1. Venom works a bit differently than most of the levels in all 3 paths. I'll talk about that in a moment. And I'll take that extra credit. Now, the thing about Venom is that it's the longest stage in the game. We don't leave at this part. Well, we leave at this part, but we don't start level 2 at this part, rather. Because the thing about Venom is that it's technically both stages 5 and 6. There's almost always a part 1 and a part 2 to it. Venom, the final goal. Andros is hiding on Venom. Fox, you must find his core brain and destroy it. Sure thing.
Good luck.
Stage 5 in level 1 is us skirting the surface of the atmosphere of the planet, more or less, with one final standard, space battle. This has the potential to be probably the most crowded level in the game in terms of enemies, because there are a lot of enemies in this. However, thankfully, since it's still level 1, they throw them at you at a pretty good pace to the point where you can still easily handle them all, especially if you are very good at spam firing the attack button. On higher difficulties, the first parts of Venom are, let's say, harder. No shit, Kyle, but I mean a lot harder. Because the thing is, and I'll get more into this later on, while level 2 is a bit funkier with how its difficulty works, the Star Fox levels aren't like exact 1, 2, 3. It's more of an escalation of maybe 1 to 3 to 6. Because level 3 is easily the hardest throughout, and especially with certain boss fights I'm thinking off the top of my head. But you do need to keep an eye out for a lot. Now, something I really do have to appreciate, even though I mentioned that it makes the game chug last part, is that this game really does look good for the Super Nintendo, especially the backgrounds and the sprite work when there's actual sprite work. It's real good looking, especially for 1993. Comparatively, though, I think when it came to this kind of vector-based, I think this is vector-based, polygon look, I do think the Genesis had the better game in a way, with that one racing game that I can't remember the name of for the life of me, but I think this is overall the more entertaining game between the two, just because I'm more of a fan of this kind of game than racing. Unless its name is Mario Kart F-Zero or Mega Man Battle and Chase for different reasons, I'm not a big racing game fan. I'll do racing minigames if I have to, especially if they're ones that have nice little gimmicks like the slot car racing in the Yakuza games, particularly Zero and Kiwami. But in others, not so much. At this point, though, I believe we're getting relatively close to the boss. Another kind of painful thing about Venom is there's very few restorative items that you're guaranteed to get. Either way, boss for this stage is Phantron, who likes to be invincible a lot of the time when it's moving. Due to its relatively short HP bar, though, you don't have to worry about too much, otherwise it just tends to fire lasers, but around low health, it'll start spinning around like this and basically do a Shadow Clone Jutsu right out of Naruto, in which case 2 of them are fake and 1 of them's real. However, while it gets another health bar at this point, it goes down so quickly with Twin Blasters level 2 that there's nothing to really fear. And that's level 5 done. However, unlike most stages, we're led right into stage 6. And that stage 6, well, I think stage 5 might be one of the most dangerous stages in the game in terms of enemy crowding. Stage 6 is the most dangerous in terms of what's actually in the level that's not an enemy. There's a lot to dodge in this next stage. I think the final portion of Venom, no matter what, might also just in general be the longest stage in the game. Also, High Song, that was most people know from Melee. Really, though, the entire game's soundtrack is just phenomenal. But this is one of the longest stages in the game, so you do need to be really careful here. Shoot these little arrow things whenever they show up, because what happens is when you get close to those blocks, I guess is the best word to use for it, they rotate in the direction that the arrow's in, and you want it to obviously not rotate into you, because that causes damage and you really don't want to die. Because the thing is about dying in Star Fox, yes, there are checkpoints along the way, but you lose any Nova Bombs, any laser upgrades you have. The only good thing about it is that if your wings are destroyed, they are restored for that, I believe. And something I've forgotten to mention is if your wings get destroyed, you need to find a specific item known as a wing jar in order to repair them. They won't get repaired after a stage. So that's something you really, really need to keep your eye on. Now, something I've actually neglected to mention thus far is that there is actually little bios in the manual for each individual stage. So let's take a look at some of the ones we've done so far. I'll skip Corneria for now because we'll be doing that in level 2. The asteroid field. There are 2 asteroid fields, consisting of thousands of small planetoids surrounding Corneria. These swarming chunks of rocks form a dangerous natural barrier to invasion of the planet, as they must be carefully navigated through. However, Andros has developed a powerful new battleship known as the Rock Crusher, which is capable of reducing planetoids to cosmic dust. It is up to the Star Fox team to destroy these Rock Crushers before they can clear the way for Andros' main battle armada. I love that they actually gave an attention to detail about lore as to why the asteroid field's actually a stage and why the Rock Crusher exists. That's really cool. In fact, there's some real efforts to making this feel like an actual space world throughout the series. Despite it being, when you get down to it, fairly standard sci-fi. These gray supply rings are double the effectiveness of the standard yellow ones, and you really want to grab one if you're below half health, because I believe it just restores half of your health at this point. The bio for the meteor base we started this part off of is this giant planetoid is actually an artificial asteroid that was created to be a great amusement facility called Meteorland. The evil Emperor Andros, however, turned it into his advanced base, leaving it a mere shadow of its former self. This well-stocked military depot is hurtling towards Corneria behind the Space Armada of Andros. So essentially, Andros is trying to Final Fantasy VII Corneria. And Phantron returns, and the first phase of this fight is more or less the same, only it starts with the Shadow Clone Jutsu type attack. But ultimately, as long as you keep you on your toes and move around a lot, you don't really have a chance of getting hit. But once the HP is put down a certain amount, the fight changes up a little bit. Yes, fly off screen so you can load a very different model that has a separation there. Phantron's true form is this weird frog robot thing. The only place you can hit it is the little blue light on, I guess, the head/body. And this thing is quite a bit more aggressive. In fact, I might say it's probably the most aggressive boss on level 1. It's constantly firing at you, be it some standard blaster bits or the little round pieces of energy that really hurt. When it jumps to the back like that, get as low as you can without touching the ground, because it's going to try and jump on you, which can be a surprising hit that does a good amount of damage. Once you keep that in mind, though, at that point, the fight basically loops. I've actually never seen it do this attack in particular before, but it splits up and just does more laser blasts, but it's nowhere near as annoying as it was in the original fight, because since there's only 2 targets anyway, you have a higher chance of hitting the real one. So ultimately, Phantron in Phase 2 on Venom 6, or Venom 2, I guess, in level 1, is one of the more aggressive bosses, but ultimately one of the easier ones, as long as you keep in mind getting low from that jump attack. Also, I love the clouds in the background. That's some really nice looking clouds. And now it's time for the final charge. Fox, you are indeed a worthy foe. But your foolish efforts are futile. Okay. This final charge is more or less the same as the Space Armada little things. However, when you get to these walls, you're going to want to use your retros a bit more because you need to slow down. Otherwise, you're going to slam right into these walls a couple times like I just did. And that's precious HP I would have liked for the final boss on me. Gone. Your Armlings have no chance against me. Where are you? Tetris? That is not a monkey face. Andros' only weak points are his eyeballs. Take both out, you win. This phase, at least. He spam fires his own little squares at you, and he also likes to try and suck you in, where if you get sucked in, it's not instant kill, but you're gonna take a good amount of damage. However, as long as you just like use your retros or even your turbo and try to pull away from it, you're likely to dodge it. But after he sucks in, he blows out a shitload of projectiles at you. I have honestly never gotten past that without getting hit at least once from my memory. Once one eye's down, just focus on the other one, and as long as you're good at mashing that button, you shouldn't have many issues with this phase. Notable though, when he's sucking in, his eyes, as you can see, turn orange, which means you cannot damage them at that point. You need to wait until he finishes this entire attack. Once both eyes are destroyed, he becomes the Atari Jaguar logo. I don't even think he has a single attack in this form, but I think he might reform into the face if you take too long. Just spam fire and he'll die really quickly on level 1. And that's game 1 done. We still got 2 more to go.
Damn it.
And now we get a little look back at the stages you did throughout that level. It tallies up your individual score percentages for each stage and then averages them out. I think for this one I got an average of 91. Ultimately, this is just here for basically score attack reasons, but it's nice that they at least keep track of that. I'm not certain of one thing though, and that's what happens if you take the black hole. I've actually very rarely needed to use the black hole. I usually do finish level 3 in one go through. So I'm not entirely sure of how the score tally works there. Plus, in the case I do use the black hole, I actually don't usually sit through the credits.
Come in, Cornelia.
This is Cornelia, Pepper speaking. Congratulations on a job well done.
Roger. I'm heading back to Cornelia.
And when I say credits, I do mean credits, because the thing is about the game is that there's technically 2 credit sequences always. There's the actual credits, which I'm not showing this part because we still have 2 playthroughs to go. But every playthrough also has a little boss look back that tells you the name, the stats, and such. For instance, I actually got the name of the core of the Space Armada wrong last part. It's not the attack core, it's the atomic base. And admittedly, I like it when games do this kind of stuff, even if it's like how Mega Man X3 did it, where it just shows like a faded version of the sprite and their stats. I don't know why, I just like the details that they go into giving these things little stats like height, width, and depth. Level 1 of Star Fox is honestly my favorite way to play the game, just because it's quick, it's relatively easy, minus a few jarring things just due to the way the game looks and such. And it's over just so quickly that I can have my fun and then just move on to something else. The other 2 playthroughs I think are still relatively short, but they're not this short. Plus the extra difficulty, especially in level 3's case, just makes it a less fun experience for me. But it is ultimately still a good way to play the game. It is the version I recommend for beginners, and if you want to get into Star Fox, at least the standard playstyle of Star Fox like this, 64, those few missions in Adventures and Assault and such, it is a good way to try and get into the game, even though I think 64 is just a better experience, ultimately. But still, I'd say you're worth your time. But with that, I'm actually gonna end this off here, even though I still see there's some time left in the time bar. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3, we'll be starting off with level 2. See you guys then.